And I think Cold Dodge was involved in that. And I said, so why are you asking a foreigner to write your biography? And I said, there is an advantage. This foreigner will not only write it, he'll also make sure it's sold. So Abed Bhai is one of the most practical persons I have met in my life. And I think this is very important to understand. And the other part where I've known him since 1986 when I was working for UNICEF. So we go back some way. And we have kept coming and then leaving. And I keep leaving BRAC. And I think it's good for me and it's good for Abed Bhai and BRAC also. But the point about the learning, and Imran and I have been discussing this a lot because I'm doing a book on BRAC, and I'm becoming more convinced that what we miss is that these books are being written by very educated people. And BRAC is not about educated people. And in my work as a historian, when I pushed the idea that the peasant is the most historical force, peasant is the one who pushes history, it was met with instant and huge opposition. In fact, it continues. But one of the advantages of if you push an idea is that at some point of time it starts to gain legitimacy. And I think that has happened, particularly when the Prime Minister chose an article I wrote about how the peasantry is producing 1971. And once that happens, people who are pro-Prime Minister are not going to say too much about it, which is good. But what we miss out is that in production of BRAC, in production of Abed Bhai, what role did the people who we are calling clients, beneficiaries, service providers are playing? Remember that Abed Bhai is from the upper class, and that's very important to recognize. He was probably not the first person to be knighted from his family. It was probably another person was also knighted. So he would be what we would be called the colonial collaborators. And I remember most people would think that, okay, he was, I think, a Guardian journal was saying, it's all noblesse oblige, the rich people who want to help the poor. This is the model what we are saying. And then when you hear the discussions, and we come to Paulo Freire and I think Marxism as a method, the idea is that we cannot save ourselves. Just like we can't save ourselves without the rich, we can't save ourselves without the West. I mean, all the good ideas must come from them. This legitimization process itself of knowledge is probably what has held us back most from understanding where our strengths lie. Abed Bhai was an extremely practical man. If he was using Paulo Freire, I'm sure there was a grant involved. Because he would do anything for getting the money. And I have seen him do it. I remember we were in China in 1989 when he was discussing schools. And all these people were so, Shaki, you can't do it, you can't do it, and you can't do it. And later in the evening, and he was saying that, look, let these people speak. They are speaking only because their bosses are saying they must say something. We'll get it done. But when he was thinking also of scaling back, he was saying because this was a practical problem. Now, going to BRAC, I think we must unlearn. We must unlearn how we look at BRAC and explore more about how the people who produce BRAC, which means the bottom, how did they do it? And as Imran and I have been discussing a lot about this, the informality and the formality. In 1971, I can go ahead and do it. I lecture at different universities and nobody says anything because, I have more data about 1971 than most people. But when you look at the informality, and if you look at the war and the events of the war, and you can see the informal space dominated. Wars happened in the informal space. Fighting happened, or everything. The formal space, let us say the Mujibnagar government, with which Abed Bhai was also close, was dependent on India for whatever they did. And I'm not going into details. But the formal space doesn't have that kind of power in societies like ours. Ours is today, one of the great areas of interest would be the Hundi culture. The Hundi society, where 50% of your foreign exchange is coming and disappearing, and Bangladesh Bank doesn't even know how it goes. Now, so where is the money going? The money is going to the villages. The villages are about at least 2 to 3 times richer than what will come out in any of formal data. And we don't know what to do with this reality. Because we are still looking for Marx. We are still looking for Paulo Freire or any of the later ideas. we are not being able to construct the formality and the informality. The informality does not move by ideology. It's a functional space. Abed Bhai understood that better than others. And when I was discussing with Imran, because we are doing a book, that is why, we are having all this discussion. But the idea that I'm going to take, so the non-formal comes about, because I can't change informality. I am formal, and I think I have the power. It's like the Constitution of Bangladesh, It's great, wonderful, we have celebrations, except that it doesn't matter. I mean, when you can say whatever you want, Bangladesh Constitution doesn't go even outside the parliament. It's probably a non-parliamentary or non-constitutional parliament. But Abed Bhai's strength lay in understanding that he controlled a very limited space. I don't know about the Communist Party, but the leftist bit, he's an upper class. Some of my relatives, upper class Communist Party relatives, they are all members of the Great Britain Communist Party, very different from being a local Communist Party member. He participated in the election and they left, and other things came over. And I asked him, why did you leave the Communist Party? He said, they talk a lot and do very little. So his dislike of ideologues was very high. He never liked any ideologues. He thought they have this solution idea. And our understanding of BRAC is very dominated. I found it. It was Paulo Freire. That's it. I understood this. Abed Bhai was shaped by the peasantry. And it is too shocking for us to accept that the under produces the top. And we don't have the methodology of learning to understand that the bottom produces the top. So we have a huge pedagogical problem. We have a huge methodological problem with our understanding of BRAC. And Abed Bhai never ever said, I'm going to change the world. Even with microcredit, he said, even Shamiron comes and tells me I've done nothing. So for him, the big relief was TUP. TUP was almost like a pleasure. I am sure these interviews are lost, but in so many discussions, he would come out, he was so happy about TUP. And I'll tell you how practical he was. A percentage of the beneficiaries were women, and they were single women. So the donors wanted single women to benefit and all that. And once they had their situation had improved, the husbands started to come back. And so the donors were very unhappy. We want to help single women. So Abed Bhai said, okay, go and find out what do they think about their returning husbands. And the women asked, and they said, oh, it's fine, the family is together, this is this, this is this, this is this. A lot of Bangladeshi Shushils also, criticized it. I'm not going to name them. And then, so Abed Bhai was there, and I think Amin Bhai was there. And he said, all this data is coming in, what will happen? Abed Bhai was so practical. He said, don't show them the data. It is completely unnecessary to tell them what is happening. So he understood that the power of the bottom, and others probably didn't. The leftist stream also comes from Amin Bhai, and I think that Amin Bhai book is very important because you can see how so many forces were coming together, and mostly informal forces. They were not formal forces. The Stalinist approach of Amin Bhai works because he comes from the EPCP, and the EPCP was disbanded, and so many people were from EPCP, and EPCP was disbanded in 1972-73. So all these forces coming together, but are they formal forces? No. Are they informal forces? Yes. And this negotiation between the formal and the informal produces the non-formal. And we need to have a framework to study the non-formal space in which BRAC is primarily located. So that, I think, is the new area of exploration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Afsan Bhai.